Okay. All right. I'll kick things off at this point. We have the pleasure of being joined today by Dr. Navras Aafreedi, an assistant professor in the Department of History at Presidency University in Kolkata, India, and where he teaches a self-designed course in Jewish studies, genocide studies, interfaith studies, and minority studies. And his courses in Jewish studies and genocide studies, with a focus on the Holocaust, are the only such courses in all of South Asia, and perhaps in all of Asia, outside Israel and China. He's the author and writer of many other pieces of content, and he's also is a research fellow with ISGAP, the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, where he has been the convener of our international seminar series on South Asia anti-Semitism and comparative perspective. And it's been a fantastic couple of months working with Dr. Aafreedi, and we're honored today to host him for his own seminar presentation. At this time, we'll hand it off to Dr. Aafreedi. And once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box, or you may raise your hand with the Zoom tool, and we might be able to work in those questions towards the end of today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gubelman. And very warm greetings and a warm welcome to all those who have been kind enough to find the time to join us for today's webinar. This is the 6th session of our webinar series titled Anti-Semitism in South Asia in Comparative Perspective. Today's webinar is dedicated to the blessed memory of the 6 million innocent lives lost to the Holocaust. I shall be speaking on the unnoticed anti-Semitism in India. The popular as well as the official narrative is that neither there is nor there has ever been any anti-Semitism in India. But this is not entirely true. The fact is that there has always been anti-Semitism in India, which is largely casual, often rhetorical, and occasionally violent. However, it has largely gone unnoticed, helped by several factors. The fact that India is one of the only 2 such countries in the world, the other being China, where Jews could live in peace with their non-Jewish neighbors for centuries without being persecuted, gives us the delusion of the absence of anti-Semitism. It has so happened because the people who indulge in anti-Semitic rhetoric are not in direct contact with Jews, and hence develop anti-Semitic notions based on the information received from unreliable secondary sources, in sharp contrast to the few who have interaction with them and develop superbly cordial relations with them. The absence of anti-Semitic persecution is explained by the fact that the host society in both India and China was non-proselytizing, and thus not interested in converting the Jews in their midst to its widely practiced religion, Hinduism in India and Confucianism in China. It is also understood that their being polytheistic made these nations more tolerant to religious diversity, unlike the monotheistic Christendom and the Islamic world, both practicing missionary religions. The numerical insignificance of Jews also worked in their favor, for they were never seen as a threat by those in majority, unlike what the case has been with the Muslims and Christians in India. There are only 5,000 Jews among 1.3 billion Indians. The attitudes of the majority in India and elsewhere in South Asia towards the Muslim minority illustrate Appadurai's theory of the fear of small numbers. The Bene Israel, the most numerous of all Jewish groups in India, did not directly experience anti Semitism, but they were aware of its presence in the rhetoric of Muslims elsewhere in India where there were no Jews. Hence, for most of the history, that is, for as long as Muslims held political power and administrative control, they were reluctant to call themselves Yahudi, which is Hindi, Urdu, and Marathi for Jewish, and instead preferred the term Bene Israel, a variant of the Hebrew Bene Israel, that is, children of Israel. They were also fearful of the majority Hindus, reflected in their abstinence from the consumption of beef. They were and are aware that the Hindus consider cow a holy animal. Hence, they feared offending the Hindus if they had beef. That the fear was not baseless is testified by the fact that 63 attacks involving cow related violence have been reported since 2010, in which 28 Indians were killed, all Muslim except 4. Most of the attacks were perpetrated after Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, the BJP led coalition, the National Democratic Alliance, came to power and formed the government at the center in 2014. In spite of being so cautious, every single Jewish man in India lives in fear of being mistaken for a Muslim and killed if caught in a Hindu Muslim clash because of the missing foreskin of his penis. This fear has been written about by several Indian Jewish writers, such as Esther David, Robin David, Sheila Rohekar, and Sadia Shepherd. In fact, the only occasion when a synagogue in India was attacked was when it was mistaken for a Muslim building during the 1992 anti-Muslim violence in Mumbai, formerly called Bombay. The Rodef Shalom Synagogue in Mumbai, home to the only Reform Jewish congregation in India, was burnt down in an anti-Muslim riot in 93. My apologies, I mentioned 92 earlier. It was 93 because it was housed in a building where Muslims resided. It has also been portrayed in award-winning Indian filmmaker Aparna Sen's film Mr. and Mrs. Iyer. Whenever the Indian Jews have come under attack, the perpetrators have been Hindus and the targeted Jews have been mistaken for Muslims. However, Yulia Agarov argues they were still attacked because in the perception of the Hindu writers, they were different enough from the expected mainstream. The genealogy of the very blueprints of anti-Muslim discrimination in India can be traced to European anti-Semitism. Hindu nationalists lay great stress in their discourse on the Hindu tolerance towards Jews in India, masking, as Yulia Agarov points out, anti-Semitic presuppositions about the alleged intolerability of the Jews. Hindu nationalist attitude towards Muslims in India mediates their admiration for Nazism uh, and fascism. Official narratives aimed at displaying the alleged Indian/Hindu tolerance particularly mention the history of Indian Jews. In their discourse, the Hindu nationalists construct Indian Jews as the perfect other, and inscribe India and Hinduism as a site of tolerance, which succeeded in accommodating a community that had been persecuted for centuries in Europe. However, today, there is no paucity of such Jews who like to believe the popular and the official narrative of the absence of anti Semitism in India, oblivious as they are of the Islamist anti Semitic rhetoric in India and ignorant of their own community's history. There is also the pressure of self preservation at work, felt by religious minorities across the world. For instance, in spite of all kinds of discrimination against them, there is abundance of videos on YouTube where the Jews in Iran and the Hindus in Pakistan can be seen praising the tolerance shown by the country they are domiciled in. Another manifestation of this pressure of self preservation is the Bene Israel attempt to distance themselves from Muslims, to whom they have been culturally so close that they often used Islamic terms such as masjid for synagogue and namaz for their Jewish prayer. In fact, all synagogues and Jewish cemeteries in India are taken care of by Muslims, even if not financially. Most of the Jews in Maharashtra, where 80% of the Indian Jews live, are resident in Muslim neighborhoods. The only engraver of Jewish tombstones for the entire state of Maharashtra is a Muslim. Most of the students in two of three Jewish owned schools in Mumbai and those in Kolkata, formerly called Calcutta, are Muslim. The only Hebrew teacher in an Indian university is also a Muslim. Similarly, India's only Hebrew calligrapher happens to be Muslim, and it was largely at the initiative of Muslim academics that the first ever conference on Hebrew language and culture took place in India. In the households of the Baghdadi community, the last of the three Jewish communities to settle in India, only Muslims were taken on as cooks because of the similarities between Jewish and Muslim dietary restrictions. This subsequently heavily influenced the Baghdadi Jewish cooking in India. Their numerical insignificance and their being perceived as undemanding endears the Jews in India to the Hindus and makes them a model minority in their eyes. In spite of being India's smallest religious minority, the Jews were, however, not recognized as a religious minority for 7 decades and thus deprived of the benefits that come along with that status. Now, I would request your permission to pause for a moment so that I can switch on my PowerPoint so that I can share my screen to show you my PowerPoint screen. Ira, is the PowerPoint visible?
Yes, it looks good.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. India is an example of a situation. Oh, before I move on, let me tell you a little about this oil portrait. This is uh, this is a painting that was made by a celebrated artist, Raja Ravi Verma, who came from a royal family in the state of Kerala. The report on the administration of the Government Museum and Connemara Public Library for the year 1901 and 1902 describes this painting as the Jews' hoarded wealth. The painting is titled The Miser. As you can see, it is the portrait of an old man in a crimson tunic, firmly gripping a bag of coins as he looks suspiciously at the viewer. The painting is part of the collection of the Government Museum in Chennai, a city that was formerly called Madras. India is an example of a situation where anti-Semitism of the past disguises itself as Islamophobia. Hindu nationalist leaders such as Madhav Sadashiv Golwalkar, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, H.S. Hedgevar, and Bal Thackeray uninhibitedly used Nazi discourse to promote discrimination against Muslims and other minorities in India. One of the leaders of the Hindu nationalist organization, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, or the National Volunteer Organization, Golwalkar expressed his approval of Nazi policy towards the Jews in the following words: to keep up the purity of the race and its culture, Germany shocked the world by her purging the country of the Semitic race, the Jews. Race pride at its highest has been manifested here. Germany has also shown how well nigh impossible it is for races and cultures having differences going to the root to be assimilated into one united whole. A good lesson for us in Hindustan to learn and profit by. Another leader, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, a prominent figure in the Hindu Mahasabha, compared them to the Jews of Germany while accusing them of extraterritorial loyalties. He said, today we, the Hindus from Kashmir to Madras and Sindh to Assam, will be a nation by ourselves, while the Indian Muslims are on the whole more inclined to identify themselves and their interests with Muslims outside India than Hindus who live next door, like the Jews in Germany. Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister of India, seen by many as a friend to Jews in Israel, is a member of the RSS. Just a week ago, on 30th March 2021, that is this year, while addressing an election rally in Kerala, a state in South India, where currently election is taking place for its assembly, he drew an analogy between Judas and the Left Democratic Front, the LDF, presently in power in Kerala, when he said, Judas betrayed Lord Christ for a few pieces of silver. LDF has betrayed Kerala for a few pieces of gold, alluding to a gold smuggling case in which a key aide of Pinarayi Vijayan, the chief minister of the incumbent LDF government in Kerala, is an accused. The page 18 of a glossary of 40 anti-Semitic terms published by the American Jewish Committee explains the anti-Semitism in the reference to Judas as a traitor in the following words. Judas Iscariot, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, received 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus to the religious authorities. Although Jesus and all 12 disciples were Jews, the Western world, through art, literature, music, and tradition, chose to depict Judas as the Jew who sold out his Savior for money. Thus, the name Judas became synonymous with traitor, contributing to the persecution of Jewish communities for 2 millennia. This false and libellous narrative the Holocaust. The Hindu nationalist admiration for the Nazis brought them into direct first Hindu nationalist to get into the ally of Hitler. Munjay is, excuse me, I want to stop on this slide for a minute before I move on any further. During the 2019 elections in India for its parliament, this man, Asif Muhammad Khan from the Indian National Congress Party, propagated that the contestant from the Aam Aadmi Party, Atishi Marlena, was Jewish. He did so because he felt that this would be seen as a disqualifier by the Muslim voters of the constituency. What is interesting is that Atishi Marlena responded to it not by condemning the inherent anti-Semitism in it, but by devoting all her energy to prove that she was, in fact, not Jewish. So these are the only two instances that I know of when Jews have actually found mention in election rallies in India. Otherwise, the Jews are absolutely absent from political discourse in the country. Understandably so, because of the invisibility that they have on account of their numerical insignificance. So, moving on, the Hindu nationalist admiration for the Nazis brought them into direct contact with the Nazis. B.S. Munje was the first Hindu nationalist to get in touch with the fascists and the leader Mussolini, an ally of Hitler. Munje is well acknowledged as the mentor of the founding supreme leader of the RSS headgiver. Between February and March 1931, while returning from the Round Table Conference, Munje made a tour of Europe with a long stopover in Italy, during which he met Mussolini. His 13-page account of the trip and the meeting is kept at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library in New Delhi. Visits to the Belila and avant-gardist organizations, the keystone of the fascist system of indoctrination of the youth, strikingly similar to the RSS, were the high points of his stay in Italy. Although it was largely Heidegger's vision and work behind the structure of the RSS, one cannot overlook the important role played by Munje in molding the RSS along fascist lines. By 1934, fascism had become so popular among the Hindu nationalists that they held a conference on it on January 31st, 1934. It was presided over by Heidegger. A year before the conference, an intelligence report had assessed that the RSS hoped to be in future India what the fascisti were to Italy and the Nazis to Germany. Savarkar openly defended the Nazis and the fascists. Once Savarkar became the president of RSS, his rhetoric against Muslims turned increasingly radical and distinctly unpleasant. He continuously referred to the Nazi treatment of Jews as a role model. In a speech he made on October 14, 1938, he suggested to draw inspiration from Germany in finding a solution to the Muslim problem in India. He said, a nation is formed by a majority living therein. What did the Jews do in Germany? They, being in minority, were driven out from Germany. So it is as a result of this that perhaps as a result of this, and also because of a number of other factors that contribute, Hitler has gained enormous popularity in India. It is now common to find young Indians sporting a photo of Hitler or the Nazi swastika as their profile picture on social networking sites. A number of films with the name Hitler in their title have been released with the protagonist as a namesake of Hitler. There is open admiration for Hindu hardliners for Hitler, and there are many other instances that go to illustrate the enormous popularity that Hitler enjoys in the country. The publisher of Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf, has sold more than 100,000 copies in the last decade. There has been a steady rise of 10%, 15% in the book's sale. And these are a few slides that go to depict the popularity that Hitler has come to enjoy in the country. Biographies of Hitler are omnipresent across the country in almost all its major languages, but you would struggle to find anything in any of those languages on the Holocaust. These are just a few pieces of literature, the only pieces of literature in the Hindi language on the Holocaust. This is an account of a visit to a concentration camp by a Hindi language author, Aday Shankar Pandey. Then this is the Hindi translation of Tadeusz Borowski's short stories, This Way for the Gas, Ladies and Gentlemen. And this is the Hindi translation of the Diary of Anne Frank. Then this is the picture of a student of mine who I discovered was sporting this Nazi swastika on his Facebook profile. And the response I got was very interesting. There are politicians in India who are named after Hitler. There's an undersecretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, called Hitler Singh. Then there are a number of Indians who sport the name Hitler when it comes to their profile on Facebook. And these are some screenshots of their Facebook profiles of Indians bearing the name Hitler. Many of them can't even spell the name Hitler, yet they are so obsessed with the character that they name themselves after him when they create a Facebook profile. There have been so many films in various Indian languages with the name Hitler in their title and with the protagonist named Hitler. The recent popularity of the name Aryan can be attributed to the Bollywood star Shah Rukh Khan, who played a character called Aryan in a Bollywood super hit, Mohabbatein. There has also been a rock group called Aryans. There could be various reasons for Hitler's rising popularity in India. The way how Indian perceptions of Jews are often based on the fictional characters Shylock and Fagin. The delusion that Subhash Chandra Bose was successful in obtaining military assistance from Hitler, and also the belief that Hitler actually weakened the British to such an extent that they had to voluntarily leave India. And the fact that North Indians particularly like to think of themselves of Aryan descent, and they particularly liked that there was somebody who had built an empire for himself and who also identified himself as an Aryan. And hence the Germans came to be seen as the kin of Indians. Then there are a number of Hindu hardliners who have openly expressed their admiration for Hitler, such as Bal Thackeray, Raj Thackeray. So we are aware that Nazis were also operational in India in spreading propaganda. So even if not guilty of Holocaust inversion and denial, the Hindu right is certainly guilty of Holocaust trivialization. A study conducted by the Anti-Defamation League found that amongst the Hindus who had heard of the Holocaust, 48% considered the number of Jewish victims to be highly exaggerated, and 11% thought of the Holocaust as a myth. The overall figure for India was just as disappointing, with 20% of Indians expressing anti-Semitic sentiments. Hindus make up 80% of India's total population that exceeds 1.3 billion, and about 14% of the entire world's population. For the advancement of the communalist agenda, the Hindu nationalists refer to the Holocaust as a trope in their anti-Muslim critique, such as Francis Gautier, a Delhi-based French journalist and a Hindu nationalist, who uses the Holocaust imagery to depict the Indic religious communities not only as the victims of Muslims, but also as the ultimate victims in human history, whose suffering was just as superior to that of the Jewish people as it was overlooked, resulting in the trivialization of the Holocaust, as pointed out by Yulia Agarov. In a speech he gave at an event commemorating the United Nations International Holocaust Memorial Day this year on 27th January, he said, that the genocide of the Hindus is the greatest genocide ever in the entire history of humanity. There is no doubt about that. Absolutely no doubt. He adds, people have said 100 million died from Hindu Kush to Mumbai 2011. Most probably true. Unquote. Gautier belongs to a brigade of foreign-bred Hindu nationalist activists such as David Frawley, Conrad Elst, and Tariq Fateh, who enjoy immense popularity on social media. It is important to mention here that Elst does not like to be described as a Hindu nationalist. However, this is how he is seen. Gautier enjoys huge following on Facebook and Twitter. It has also been observed that the desire to draw parallels between Jewish and Hindu victimhood is often the motivation for Hindu students from India pursuing Holocaust studies in Israel. Audrey Trushke, a historian of pre-modern India, recounts how over the last few years she has been attacked by Hindu nationalists with dozens of ugly messages full of vicious anti-Semitic slurs for her work on the Mughals because she has been mistaken for a Jew. The narrative of the absence of anti-Semitism in India is a flawed one, for it completely overlooks the long existing anti-Semitic rhetoric among certain sections of its Muslim population, the third largest in the world. It is convenient to ignore it because this anti-Semitic rhetoric has never translated itself into violence against Indian Jews. There were attacks on Jews in Karachi in 1948, coinciding with the creation of the modern state of Israel. Karachi, just a few months before that, was part of British ruled India, but was now the capital of Pakistan, carved out of British India for her Muslims in 1947. Those who attacked were not the local Sindhi Muslims, but the Urdu speakers who had migrated from the plains of northern India and prior to settling in Karachi had never come across Jews. The Jews attacked in India have always been white/Western Jews. A few examples are the abduction of Israeli Jewish tourists in Kashmir in 1991 and the murder of one of them, the killing of all Jews present at the Beit Chabad during the 2 days of the multiple terrorist attacks in Mumbai in November 2008. The only Jew saved from there was the infant child of the rabbi there. He was rescued by the Muslim chef and his Christian nanny. The explosion of an Israeli diplomat's wife's car in Delhi in 2012, and a bomb explosion just a couple of months ago in January this year, right outside the embassy of Israel in New Delhi. However, the fact that Indian Jews were never attacked should not obscure the fact that some of the most prominent ideologues of Muslim anti-Semitism have been from India. These are a few slides that show images of those attacks. Such as, so some of those the most prominent ideologues of Islamist anti-Semitism have been from India, such as Shah Waliullah, also called Waliullah, whose period is 1702 to 1763, considered one of the originators of Pan-Islamism. Then there is Rahmatullah Kairanvi, Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi, and Abul Hasan Ali Hasni Nadwi. Some of the most popular Muslim televangelists have belonged to India, such as Zakir Naik, and some of the major ideological roots of Islamist jihadist ideology, of which anti-Semitism is an integral part, lie in India. India is also home to some of the largest Islamist movements, such as Tablighi Jamaat, the largest Sunni Muslim revivalist movement in the world, Jamaat-e-Islami, a prototype of political Islam in South Asia, Darul Uloom Deoband, alleged source of ideological inspiration to the Taliban, and Nadwatul Ulama of Lucknow. Islamic revival is a response to Western and secular trends by supporting an increased influence of Islamic values on the modern world. A return to Islam in its purest form is seen by Islamic revivalists as a solution to all the ills of Muslim societies and modern society as a whole. Anti-Semitism has emerged as an integral part of political Islam or Islamism in modern times. Bassam Tibi considers Islamism at its core a form of Jew hatred because of its belief that the Jews rule the world and hence are in conflict with Islam. In an approach of self-victimization, the guilt of the misery of Islamic civilization is attributed to crusaders and Jews. Therefore, Islamists prefer to engage in polemics against them. The emergence of Islamist anti-Semitism has been simultaneous to that of Islamic revivalism. The development of Islamic revivalism as a social movement is intertwined with the life histories and intellectual contributions of particular individuals. These individuals advanced the formative ideas, voiced the concerns of various social groups, and molded public debates by selecting certain ideas while rejecting the others. They produced an ideology that used social impulses to make a new discourse possible. Some of the most important of these ideologues came from India. They are critical to understanding Islamism and the anti-Semitism inherent in it. Some of the recurring themes in the Islamist rhetoric in India and also elsewhere is one, Jewish antagonism towards Islam since its advent. Two, projection of racism, jealousy, stubbornness, arrogance, treason, and deceit as traits of Jewish character. And three, the acquisition of the falsification of sacred texts. uh, I am conscious that I have run out of time, so I will skip the remaining portion and would be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much. I'll quickly run through my PowerPoint. There are a number of slides here, images of the most prominent Islamist ideologues. And then there has also been this problem of Holocaust inversion, that is calling the Jewish Israelis the New Age Nazis. I had run out of time, so that I couldn't speak about that. That's it. So I'll quickly open the chat box to see the questions that I have received, and I'll try to answer each question one by one. Okay, I have received a question. It reads, there seems to be so many contradictions here. The Nazis quoted Hindus and Muslims while denigrating each of these groups one to the other. Modi seems to want to build good relations with Israel but refers to Judas. Can you comment on these contradictions? It's very, well, the Nazis were very clever. They were using the propaganda that suited each group. So for Muslims, they employed one set of arguments. For the Hindus, it was another set of arguments. As far as the invocation of Judas by Modi is concerned, he did so keeping in mind that the state of Kerala has a very numerically strong Christian minority. So it was an attempt on his part to win their support, to win Christian support in the state of Kerala. As far as the Jews are concerned, when it comes to Indian politics, they are absolutely irrelevant. There have been a few occasions when Jews have come up in the political discourse, for instance, in the northeastern states of Manipur and Mizoram, where the Judaism movements became an issue because the evangelists became alarmed when many members of their congregations started converting to Judaism. And hence, the Indian state responded to their concerns by imposing great restrictions on Amishav and Shavi Israel. I know that Rabbi Eliyahu Abichail, who was the first rabbi from Israel to get in touch and get involved with Beni Menashe, he was refused visa uh, after one point, and he couldn't travel to India no matter how much he wanted to, because he was seen as somebody who was indulging in mass conversions in northeastern India, in the northeastern states of Manipur and Mizoram, which was of course detrimental to the interests of the politicians there, who depended on the votes of the Christians there, because these are states where Christians are in big numbers. Any, I don't see any other question. Well, there is a comment, would love to be in touch with you. Okay, well, there doesn't seem to be any other question. Ira?
Yeah, it looks like
Uh, so, okay, there is one
here they
question
come.
from a dear friend, Andrea. She asked, how do you think this should be addressed? No, this is a question from Abigail. And then there's a question from Andrea. How will India deal with this anti-Semitism now? Okay, so both the questions are concerned with the same thing as to what should be done and what can be done. Well, there are several problems. One is the problem of Holocaust denial, which is almost pandemic, particularly among certain sections of the Muslims, because, and you can clearly see the motive behind Holocaust denial. Muslims believe that if they deny that the Holocaust occurred, if they deny its historicity, it enables them to rob the state of Israel of the only justification it can have for its existence. That is how they think, that is how they look at it. So it is for this reason that they devote all their energies to denying the Holocaust or minimizing its scale. You could say that if a Holocaust education is introduced in India on a large scale at the secondary level of education, perhaps that might make a difference. We have before us the case from America. Anti-Semitism has increased in equal proportion to to Holocaust education. Anti-Semitism has increased as much as the Holocaust education has increased in America. Anti-Semitism has increased as much as the Holocaust education has increased in America. So it hasn't yielded the desired result. The reason could be that if this has been pointed out by Dina Porat, that if we talk only about the Holocaust, it proves to be a self-defeating exercise, because then people have been found to be asking questions as to why the Jews. They must have done something to, to attract such atrocities. They must have asked for it. So Holocaust education in isolation cannot be helpful. People need to be given the entire history of anti-Semitism. Without the long history of anti-Semitism, simply focusing on Holocaust would not yield the desired result. Point one. Another point was made by my friend, Professor Vishwanath, that is, we must promote interaction with Jews, because most of the Indians never come into direct contact with Jews and know them only through secondary sources. So a step in this direction can be that we organize youth camps where Indians from all religious persuasions and and Israelis, not just Jewish, but also other Israelis of other religious persuasions come together and have interaction. So that could be a good exercise. Now I noticed that there are some more comments or questions. Let me look at those. Andrea rightly writes that Israel doesn't exist just because of the Holocaust. Of course, that is what the case is. But this is a delusion. The delusion is that the Israel was given to the Jews as compensation for the Holocaust. So how do you erase this delusion? It can be done only by raising awareness through education, not just of the Holocaust, but education of Jewish history. And when you teach Jewish history, you automatically teach the history of anti-Semitism. I'm deeply indebted to my employer, Presidency University, which has allowed me to launch a course in global Jewish history. So I teach a course in global Jewish history at the bachelor's level and teach a Holocaust-focused course at the master's level. So do you think that many young Indians who currently admire Hitler for his strength and power in building a strong Germany, in promoting German nationalism, have also accepted the anti-Semitism in his writings? Not all of them. You see, admiration for Hitler in India does not emanate out of anti-Semitism. There are a number of factors at work here. One is that there is a craving for a strong leadership. They do not seem to have good examples of strong leaders. This is point one. Then, of course, you cannot discount the Hindu nationalist admiration for Nazis, because that is mediated by the attitude towards Muslims. So they want a leader who could do to the Muslims in India what Hitler did to the Jews in Germany. So, so it's not because of anti-Semitism that Hitler is admired. It is rather because of the very deep dislike, very strong dislike for Muslims. Uh, and there are, of course, and there is, of course, also this delusion that Hitler contributed to India's freedom struggle, because Hitler and the Nazis led by Hitler weakened the British might to such an extent that it was not possible for them. They just could not afford to hold on to this huge territory, to this huge colony of theirs, India. And hence, they were compelled to voluntarily leave India. So this is also there. Then there is also this impression that Hitler actually provided military assistance to Subhash Chandra Bose, who raised an army against the British, which is of course baseless. Subhash Chandra Bose did meet Hitler, and he did try his best to obtain military assistance from him, but he was not successful. Do you think that India's anti-Israel policy in the 50s and 60s had an element of anti-Semitism? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. There were a number of factors, and among the several factors, the Muslim factor was also there. Then there was also this fear that if India established diplomatic relations with Israel, then the entire Muslim world would fall in the lap of Pakistan on the issue of Kashmir. And India was looking for Muslim support at the United Nations on the issue of Kashmir. Then you also have to bear in mind that 70% of India's fuel requirements are fulfilled by the oil producing Arab countries. So India feared that those countries could refuse oil supplies to India. That was also a factor. Yet another factor was that there is a huge expatriate Indian population working in oil-rich Arab countries. They send money to they send money to their homes in India. So had India feared that if they established diplomatic relations with Israel, they would lose their employment, those expatriate Indians. Then there is also a factor that goes back in history. As far as the Arab nationalists are concerned, Arab nationalists were constantly in touch with Indian nationalists. And the Arab nationalists never had any inhibition, any hesitation in voicing their support for India's struggle for freedom from the British rule. In sharp contrast to the Arab nationalists, the Zionists were reluctant to do so because the Zionists feared that if they did so, they would lose the hope of drawing concessions from the British for the refugees from Europe trying to enter Mandate Palestine, because the British had already rationed the number of the Jewish refugees who could be allowed to settle in Mandate Palestine. So that was main concern. Secondly, Zionists did send emissaries to India to convince, to make the Indian nationalist leaders understand Zionism, but it was too little and too late. Uh, so hence, let me complete. Hence, there was for very long this misconception that Zionism was a kind of a colonial project. Jews that did not belong to the Middle East, and the state of Israel shouldn't have come into existence at the very first place. The state of Israel came into existence in 1948. India waited for two Muslim countries, at least one Sunni country and one Shia country, to first recognize the state of Israel before India recognized the state of Israel. So the Shia country, the first Shia country to recognize the state of Israel was Iran. The first Sunni country to recognize the state of Israel was Turkey. India gave recognition to the state of Israel only after these two countries had given recognition. And then it waited for 40 years before it established diplomatic relations with Israel. Established diplomatic relations with Israel after 4 decades only when the Madrid conference took place and the Palestinians and the Israelis came together to hold talks. And that is also when the world had changed from a unipolar world into a unipolar world. India always fancied itself as a non-aligned country, but the fact is that India was always firmly in the Soviet camp, while Israel was seen to be in the American camp. So the Cold War was also at play. So there were all these factors that contributed to India's not establishing diplomatic relations with Israel, but anti-Semitism was certainly not one of those factors. You can say that India was concerned about the Muslim opinion, and there was a strong element of anti-Semitism among Muslims. So if you approach it through this angle, then you can say that anti-Semitism too played a role in the absence of India-Israel relations for 4 decades. Well, there is one comment from Ms. Cheryl Silver: as disturbing as it is to hear your remarks about some high-profile anti-Semites in India, I am wondering how extensive the percentage of anti-Semites are among India's citizens, and if there are also many in India who strongly support Israel as a thriving democracy and innovative high-tech economy in the Middle East, which has managed to thrive despite being surrounded by neighboring countries who until recently have almost all behaved as aggressive enemies. The proportion of anti-Semites is very little, but this should not make us complacent. We need to take notice even of the few anti-Semites who are there, because they are very vocal and they have been very influential. So we ignore this anti-Semitism at our own peril. And the second question is, are there strong supporters of Israel? Yes, there are very strong supporters of Israel in India. Paradoxically, the strongest supporters of Israel are those who have traditionally admired the Nazis and the fascists. As I said, the admiration for Nazism and fascism did not emanate out of anti-Semitism. The same way, so this would help you understand as to how the people who have admired Nazis could also have admiration for the state of Israel. But this is explained by the fact that the state of Israel is admired to such an extent that there are people who are desirous that India imitates Israel in dealing with terrorists, in being a strong state, and in dealing also with its Muslim minority, the way they perceive how the state of Israel deals with her Muslim minority. It's a matter of perception. And they admire Israel only because they feel, they believe that Israel's approach to dealing with its Muslim minority and also with its enemies is high-handed. So that is what they particularly admire Israel for. Israel is seen, is perceived as a very strong state, and Muslims are seen as a common enemy of both Jews and Hindus. And hence, in their eyes, this makes Israel a natural partner of India. To them, India is Hindu India, not the secular republic that India is. Now, latest research shows, this is a question from Andrea, latest research shows that anti-Semitism is greatest among the more educated, and that is due to the leftist ideology of majority of academics. So how do we counter this trend, which is likely true in India? Yes, it is true to a certain extent in India. For instance, I did not have the opportunity to talk to you about Holocaust inversion. Most of the people who have written in the Indian press and resorted to Holocaust inversion have been of leftist leanings. In fact, some of them have also mentioned their Jewish lineage, believing that this would validate their anti-Zionism and it would legitimize the anti-Zionism. So I think the solution lies in raising awareness, and awareness can be raised by, by two ways. Education, that is educating children about Jewish history, which automatically would make them aware of the long history of anti-Semitism, right at the secondary level of education, and then uh, organizing, providing avenues for greater interaction between Indians and Jews and Indians and Israelis. These are the only ways I see. And of course, if Israel is genuinely concerned about its image, then Israel should certainly think about launching TV news channels and radio news channels in different languages of the world, including the major languages spoken in India and in her neighborhood. And Israel is in a very comfortable position to do so, given the fact that the Israelis have their origins in 70 different countries of the world. So it is the most linguistically diverse society. So Israel is in fact in a very comfortable position to do so if it wants to. But I have come to notice that this is not among its priorities when it comes to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the way the Embassy of Israel functions. And I also am very critical as to how the Jewish advocacy groups have been functioning in India. But that would require a separate lecture. I am very annoyed with some of the collaborations that certain Jewish advocacy groups have done in India, particularly the American Jewish Committee, which has collaborated with Indian Pluralism Foundation. The founder of the Indian Pluralism Foundation, the founder of Indian Pluralism Foundation has indulged in blatant anti-Semitism in this book, Palestine Essays. And yet, in spite of that, in spite of that, the The American Jewish Committee has held events in collaboration with him, and even the Israeli ambassador to India has spoken under its auspices. If you allow me to go to my PowerPoint present, I can see the watch, and I have already exceeded 2 minutes. But if Ira allows me 5 minutes more, then I'll wind it up.
By all means.
Thank you so much, Ira. So I'll just show you some slides. Uh, okay, uh, it seems I just did not add those slides. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that even the ambassador of Israel in India and this great Holocaust scholar, Dina Porat, has fallen into the trap and has spoken under the auspices of the Indian Pluralism Foundation, in spite of the anti-Semitic rhetoric that its founder has indulged in. I'll read out a quote of his before we end the session. Just imagine a person who is so full of hatred and venom for the state of Israel, and the ambassador of Israel agrees to speak under the auspices of this organization. He writes in a chapter that he published in this book, after more than 2,000 years of living in oblivion as vagabonds, these Jews were overwhelmingly rapturous on the accomplishment of declaring the state of Israel, redefining their identity as a national group and not just as a religious group. The birth of Israel came at the cost of Palestinian blood and treasure at a very prodigious price. And then he goes on to equate Benjamin Netanyahu with al-Baghdadi, the chief of the ISIS. He writes, Benjamin Netanyahu, the intemperate, prima donna, pretentious, diabolic, self-declared caliph of the Jews, who is as large a Duracent threat as al-Baghdadi, is responsible in destabilizing the peace of the already precarious, near collapse Hermetic Strip. And yet, even the ambassador of Israel to India has agreed to speak under the auspices of his organization at events organized by Indian Pluralism Foundation in collaboration with the American Jewish Committee. It's simply a marriage of convenience. The operative of the American Jewish Committee in India is always on a lookout for partners, collaborators with whom he can organize events, and he hasn't been very successful in getting the right partners, so he very frequently agrees to hold events with him, in spite of my having brought this to his knowledge. Yet they have preferred to ignore this, and they prefer to think that he has had a change of heart. Sure, Andrea, I will send you all the information about this so that you can bring this to the American Jewish Committee's knowledge. Thank you so much. My apologies, Susan, if I misinterpreted your comment.
I think it was just a chat back and forth. So no, shouldn't be any problem.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So I think we can end the session now. There aren't any more questions. Let me thank everybody who found the time to join us for today's session. I'm conscious of my strong Indian accent. My apologies, I can't help that. And my apologies to my friend Ira for exceeding the time limit. Thank you very much to everybody.
Navras, it was an honor to host you today, and yeah, I think everyone could has seen what a wonderful collection of speakers you've brought together throughout this seminar series, and your own presentation and contributions to the field have really been extraordinary. And wish we could have even more time with you to explore this subject matter, but we will be back in future Thursdays throughout these next few months at 9 a.m. Eastern. Our next talk will be on Jews in Afghanistan, a historical perspective with Dr. Fareed Yunus from California State University. So please join us on April 22nd at 9 a.m. Eastern when we'll reconvene then. In the meantime, stay safe, and thanks again for joining us today. Bye now.